Okay, so afternoon session for AT3 for 4010. And we have just been looking at the clause 6.5.1 for parking calculations. Let me just pull that up here. So the table in 6.5.1 told us that we have to, for every 100 meters of warehouse space or storage space, we need, well, let me find the actual clause. So general industry, one car park for every 100 meters squared of net floor area other than offices, and 4 for every net floor area that is office. So what are our areas? Do we know what is our net floor area of office? Anyone got it yet? Not yet? What was yours? 61.8? 84, yep. Anyone else have one for net floor area of the office? Yeah, the mezzanine, the office area. Just verify that first. And what about the warehouse area? What did you have for that? Or all the areas other than office?
The two middle are a bit smaller than the two outside ones.
Oh, okay.
So it's just slightly.
Yeah.
So for the ones on the end, I got 397.13 meters.
Yeah. And the other two?
And the other two were 391.81 meters. That's what I had got.
And so the mezzanine areas are the same?
They're the same.
Yeah.
It's just
Yep. Yep. All right, anyone verify them areas? Andy, have you worked out any areas yet? Still doing it? All right, I'll give you guys a few minutes just to keep going with that. So we're going to assume our figures are 250.36 meters squared for office. It's an average of what everyone got off their drawings. Like I said, everyone's expected to use their own exact figures for their building as the way they've drawn it. And for warehouse, we're going to assume an average of 1570.55 meters squared for the warehouse. Sorry, Sharon, if you can't see that, I'm going to write them a bit higher in a minute. On this site, we have two buildings. We have an existing building and we have a proposed building. Often it's very difficult to go back and get the original car parking calculations for the existing buildings. They're not generally recorded on the development permit, so it's a case of calling. Sometimes I call the planners themselves and ask them to look back through the files and see do they have a record of them. If not, we just work on the areas of the existing building. So sometimes it's going to be important for you to go to site and work out these areas. Hopefully you can get some floor plans, otherwise you have to go into site and do a measure, okay? So we are going to assume, or we're going to be given the measurements for the existing building. You all need to take a record of this. These are the measurements for the existing building. So you got just over 1,000 square meters of warehouse. We've got some showroom space, 120 square meters, and we've got 230 meters of office. Now, and then on our proposed, oh, actually, I wanted to take a photograph of that before I erased it. One moment.
So that's, these are the measures for what's already there, for existing. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, did I just wipe off my one further? Now, when I've got those all lined up like that, the areas that I need, I'm going to work out how many car parking spaces I need for each of these different things, okay? So if I've got, if it's one car park for every 100 square meters of warehouse for the existing building, how many car parks does that require? Andy, could you work that out? So basically all you're going to do is you're going to divide this by 100, because it's one car park for every 100 square meters. How many 100 square meters do we have in this? Yeah. So this is going to be at 10.65. Of course, we can't have 0.6 of a car parking space, but we're not rounding any numbers yet. We're going to wait right to the end. Okay, for showroom, we need to go back to the planning scheme, and we need to look at what is the, we don't have showroom in this particular application apart from the existing building, but we need to go back to the planning scheme, and we need to look at what it says for showroom. So if we go down through this table in the table is the table to 6.5.1, and we need to find out what their car parking calculation should be for showroom space. It's alphabetical order, so here we go. We got showroom sales, and it says for showroom sales we need 4 for every 100 meters squared of floor area, okay? So for 120 square meters, at 4 spaces per 100 square meters, for the first 100 here, if we take 120, for the 100 equals 4 spaces, isn't that right? For every 100 square meters we have, we need 4 spaces, and then we want 0.2 of that. So what does that work out to be?
4.8.
4.8. Is everyone with me on those calculations? Yeah? It's just a simple calculation, really, okay? The maths of it. All right, for the 230 square meters of office space, what does the table tell us we need? Despina, do you know? 4 for every 100, yeah. And we've got 230. How many spaces is that going to equate to? Divide by 100, multiply by 4. take 230 divided by 100 divided by 4. 9.2. So how are you okay with those calculations? Sharon, you're following the calculations?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what we're doing here? Okay. No worries, because you're going to have to do this with your own figures for your own application. This is just the example. Okay, so that's what we need on the site for the existing building. Then we come back to our new building, and we've got 250.36. Let's just say that we kept it at that. 0.36 for office. What do we need to do for office? For 4 spaces per 100 square meter, how many spaces do we need for office? Nicole, I'm going to ask you for the answer on this one. Sorry? It's for 250.36. So we're going to take the 250.36. We're going to divide by 100. So that gives us how many we need for 1 per 100, and then we're multiplying by 4. Sorry? 10. 10 point what? Come on.
Use a calculator.
Yeah, use the calculator. I'm not asking you to do it in your head. 10.0. 10.01. We'll leave it at that for now. I hope that one doesn't come back to bite us. And for the next one then, it's for warehouse. It's a simple dividing by 100, because it's not 4 per 100, it's dividing by 100. Just going to move 2 decimal places. That's 15.7 random, too far down to even worry about. Okay, now what we need to do is total these, okay? Somebody with a nice calculator want to do that for me?
So my first calculation was
50.36, okay. Anyone else? 50.36? Andy? Same? Just an addition of car parking spaces. So remembering that this is car spaces. Yeah? And so we know that we can't have 0.8 of a car space, 0.2, 0.7, but we won't round up anything until we get to this figure at the bottom. When we have a full figure for the whole site, what it's telling us is that we require 50.36 car parking spaces on this site for these 2 developments, okay? The existing and the proposed. So now we want to round up, and of course we have to round up to a whole car parking space, so it's simply 51 car spaces required. That's the amount required, okay? On our site plan, we're going to have to show the car parking spaces provided. You can pretty much copy them off the AutoCAD drawings that you already have, okay, of this development. But that's how we do the car parking calculation for a site that's got a proposed and an existing building. You pretty much just redo the calculation. Sometimes, be careful when you're going to start a job. Sometimes and often sites with existing buildings happened a long time ago, and they do not have the required car parking spaces on site for that building, okay? So not only might you be having to develop new car parking spaces for your new proposed building, you might have to develop new car parking spaces for the existing building as well, because the car parking calculation is for the whole site, not just your proposed building, okay? So keep that in mind if you're ever doing an application like this where you've got an existing and a proposed building on the same site. Now can you see how getting your areas to be the most minimal they can be on your floor plan is actually to your advantage? Because if you were only able to provide, for instance, 50 car parks on this site, you'd only be just over by the 1. Whereas if your areas are bigger, your required spaces will be greater. Okay. Yes?
For existing building,
Mhm.
already up,
Mhm. Yeah.
if we can just prepare the new one,
Mhm.
but if we couldn't prepare the old
Mm.
building, maybe previous law.
So what happens is when you take on a site, you're taking on the whole site. It's not just the new building component of it. You're taking on the existing site as well. So it's part of your research you do at the beginning of the project is to find out what approvals had already been granted on this building. In fact, when this application went through, the existing building had only ever had approval as a storage, as a warehouse storage, and then, you know, in between it had a change of use without any application being made on it. So what was originally a whole warehouse from front to back became part warehouse, part office, part showroom. And so the calculation had to be redone anyway. It was found that it wasn't compliant the way it was. So as part of this application, because again the application is for the whole site, that car parking calculation had to be done for the whole site. And they generally won't let you just do it for the new part of the site. They will make you do it for the existing use on the existing building. Because, you know, 20, 30 years ago, this wasn't worried about so much, but now it is. And a lot of these buildings, existing buildings, will be older than that. So to bring everything up to date, and before they allow new development, they insist that the car parking calculation for the whole site is brought up to date. It's compliant? Yeah, well, we have to be able to fit 51 car parks on our site.
Do we know, can I see,
You can't see, no, well, let's open the AutoCAD drawing. Yep. We're not non-compliant anyway.
There's two different site plans there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the one I did, that one.
So this one has.
The other one I did has.
This one has even more. This one has 59.
Yeah.
So and what's the other one you're talking about?
There's another one, like the page.
Next page.
Yeah, the next.
Has a different number of car parks on it.
Different sites.
I don't know whether. Yeah.
That one.
I did this one.
Ah, right. Yes.
So I don't know why. Is that like options or why?
This looks like. What is this?
Site plan.
They're both in the same set, are they?
Yeah, I drew my site based on this one, and I think Christina did based on the other one.
Right. We should have picked one of these.
This one has got less car parking spaces and it's compliant.
How many car parking spaces is this one? It doesn't have any figures on it.
52.
52. Okay.
Quickly,
So I, from memory, what I think had happened was that we looked at. I don't know why both of the site plans would be in the same set together though. We had looked at this as an initial proposal because the existing car parks here were like this on the site. So I think that was the original proposal. Looking at what was just existing and leaving it like that, and it meant car parking back here as well. And then I think what the actual proposal that went through, when this calculation was all done and we realised we didn't actually need this many car parking spaces, it was rejigged to be this one. No, next one. When this is zoomed in, it won't flick onto the next page for me. This one. So this is a little bit better layout in terms of we've got a 6 metre wide road. We've got a couple of existing car parks just in by the building there. We get the 6 metres in for the two-way road. We get just parallel parking down the side of the site there. Some existing car parks here at this end of the building. None here, because I think the distance between those two buildings was, you know, we need this area for loading and unloading and all of those things, for trucks turning as well. The truck has to be able to come down here and turn right around here. So we got rid of all the car parks here and brought them down. Well, we were always going to put them in on this side.
So, do we have
We've got
to
7 metres there.
number every single car park?
So when you're...
Or, you know, the way you have like a total of like 19 car spaces or, you know, yeah, new...
Yeah, what normally happens is that you would have a site plan that would number maybe number 1 and then 5 and then 10 and then 15. You don't have to number every single one, but maybe in 5s or 10s, something like that, just to indicate it's easier for the person to read.
And make sure that obviously the final...
Yes, and the final number, of course. Yeah. So it's easy to read. I'm pretty flexible. If you want to do the car park whatever way you've drawn it and just show me the number of car parks in it, either way, and there's neither a right or a wrong way here. You can have angled parking. You do need to check your angled parking meets the requirements of the car parking layout that we looked at in the planning scheme. So when we look at the planning scheme further down, let me zoom out a little bit. Always seems to help. So the parking layout, we went through that in AT2. I'm not going to go through it again. So it's about having the 6 metre wide road, 3.5 for the one-way traffic flow. And then we look at having angled parks and whether or not your roads are wide enough to deal with that angled parking, if you're going to show that. Okay? But we went through all this in AT2. I'm not going to go through all of the car parking gradients and all that again. You can read it yourselves, and we've done it before. And again, it's just a statement in your statement of effect to say that you do comply with all of this. Nothing else there we need. Okay, brings us on nicely to our next clause, 6.6. This is one we won't have come across before, and it's about loading bays. And with commercial buildings, it's quite important. The purpose of this clause is to provide for the loading and unloading of vehicles associated with the use of the land. So obviously we know if we've got warehouses or storage spaces or general industry, there's probably going to be pretty large trucks going to try and access these buildings for everyday business. A general industry, hospital, hotel, licensed club, light industry, motel, office, restaurant, shop, showroom sales, transport terminal or warehouse use or development on the site must provide areas wholly within the site for loading and unloading of vehicles at the ratio of, if for a general industry and all of those other things, 1 loading bay for a single occupation of a net floor area of 10,000 meters squared or less. Okay, so 10,000 meters squared is a lot of space, and you only need to provide 1 loading bay. Or 1 loading bay for every 5,000 square meters of net floor area, or part thereof in excess of 10,000 meters squared. So in other words, if you've got a 15,000 meter squared building, you're going to have to provide 2 loading areas, okay? But for anything under 10,000 square meters, just 1 loading bay area, okay? Now, it does say for a single occupation. Do we have a single occupation? What if we've got 4 units in our warehouse and they're all leased to separate tenants? Do you think they're going to want to share a loading bay? No. So, technically speaking, under the planning scheme, we can get away with 1 loading bay for this entire, even the existing building, new building, because what's our areas? Warehouse, 1,000 meters squared and 1,500. We're only got, 2,500 meters squared approximately. And it says anything below 10,000 square meters, we can get away with 1 loading bay. So if we provided 1 loading bay anywhere on the site, we would be compliant. However, good design leads me to believe that we should provide a loading bay for each of the warehouses individually, because if Andy owns one of the warehouses and Nicole owns the other one, and Nicole's truck is delivering her goods at 11 a.m. and yours is coming at the same time, there's going to be conflict and argument between the tenants about who gets to use loading bays and who's waiting on who and who's, delaying business of the other. So I would suggest that you would always put a loading bay in for any warehouse development individually. B says there, if for an office, restaurant or shop, you want a loading bay for every 2,000 meters squared, okay? So what is your loading bay? A loading bay has to be at least 7.5 meters by 3.5. It must have a clearance of 4 meters high and have access that is adequate for its purpose. In other words, a truck can actually get to it, okay? You can't have a loading bay that doesn't have, a road going to it, for instance. When you think about loading bays, I don't want you to think about them in 2 dimensions. In terms of the 7.5 by 3.5, it's an area like a car park, but it's a lot bigger. So it's going to be the 7.5 by the 3.5. But also think about your loading bay in terms of the height. Okay, so if this is my ground line, I need to have a height of 4 meters. A loading bay does not have to be external. A loading bay can be internal, okay? And so I've used this on quite a few of these unit type developments. I have made sure that my roller door is a minimum of 4.5, 5 meters high. So it's higher than the 4 meters high. And then put the loading bay directly inside the door of the warehouse, okay, or unit. So let's have a look at our drawings again. We've got in elevation, don't do that to me. So we've got a door here that is 4.7 high, okay? See that? So our truck can reverse or drive forwards into this roller door, and it can unload in the nice shade inside the warehouse, closer to where the goods are probably going or coming from, depending on what the use is. So once we have that, we can say then on our floor plans that our loading bay can be located in here, inside our roller door for each of our units, okay? Now, in theory, we probably should still provide one external loading bay for the existing warehouse, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to say, can we get away with that? Most likely the planners will never think about that, but in theory, there should be a loading bay for the existing warehouse as well. But as I said, it's an old application where we try not to get too involved in it. We have to for the car parking calculation, but we're not going to try and, seek compliance for that building as it is. Maybe the planner will come back in the application and say, no, you need to provide a loading bay. If we look back on our site plan, where could we possibly do that? So there's certainly, in this building, see this dashed line here? When you actually go to site, that's actually a concrete plinth that sits pretty high. So the site is all falling towards the proposed new building. And so with the floor level in here, kind of comes out, and maybe here, maybe it's a decent step up. It might be the height of the table up onto a plinth there. So most likely what will happen in that scenario is a truck wants to reverse into this and be able to load onto it and to access its load through this roller door. Now this building also has roller doors all the way down. But they generally want to be able to load in here. We don't want loading bays like pulling up on the road here. Okay, but we certainly could locate a loading bay here. Because if there's a truck parked here unloading onto this area, the other trucks can come around the outside of it. Yeah. There's plenty of space between the two buildings there. It's quite a big yard in there. So if you had to do it, that's what I would do. I don't really need to see that on your drawings. I'm really just interested in what's for the new building, and I suggest you indicate a loading bay. And so to indicate a loading bay, you literally draw your rectangle, you don't need to show the 4 meters. The roller doors, you can explain that your roller door is higher than this 4 meters in your statement of effect. And for the loading bay itself, I would just draw a line like that and write loading bay on the drawings. Okay, it's a bit like your private open space. You just want to indicate that the area is available in that location. One for each unit. Yeah. So you're gonna show it on the floor plan. You show it there. So you've got a part floor plan here and a part floor plan showing the other units there. All right, that's loading bays. And then we get to a really fun one again, the setbacks. And it's 9.1.1. Industrial setbacks. So 9.1.1, the purpose of this clause is to ensure that buildings are sited to provide adequate visual amenity in industrial zones. Buildings in zones LI, light industry, GI, general industry, and DV, which is, I think, the one out in East Arm, it's some sort of special development zone, are to be sited in accordance with the table to this clause. All street frontages except access driveways or footpaths are to be landscaped to a minimum depth of 3 meters. Okay, this is really important. We haven't come across this before. And what it means is that from the street frontage, so all street frontages, whether it's a primary street or a secondary street, if you've got a corner block, it applies to both frontages that front onto a street. But you need to landscape for a minimum depth of 3 meters. That's 3 meters on your site. It's irrelevant what happens on the street in front of that. You could have a 10-meter wide nature strip. Doesn't matter. For 3 meters on your site, you need to provide some visual amenity in terms of landscaping. So let's have a look at our site plan and see where that might apply to us and what needs to be on the site plan. So you can see it's quite clearly marked there. So we've just marked this end. So so it only applies to where there's room to do it. So in other words, here we'd have to have 3 meters in front of the car parks. This is a road, so obviously we can't have anything here. This is coming straight through. This is our crossover. We can get some more landscaping in here for the distance of the 3 meters again. And then we have building there. And on the other side, very similar, we're going to provide 3 meters of landscaping here and 3 meters of landscaping here. Okay, we may provide more landscaping overall in the end, but that's what we need to show as a minimum on the plans to comply with our planning regulations, okay? And that's to do with clause 9.1.1. So very clearly on your drawings, making sure you're showing landscaping in those areas. That's our only street frontage running from this boundary here to this one. Trying to remember the orientation of this. This is north, isn't it? So our east boundary to our west boundary on the northern boundary is where we need to do that. Generally speaking, although I know it wasn't picked up in this application, but we do actually have another street boundary here, don't we? We have Tiger Brennan on that side. So you probably want to show 3 meters of landscaping facing out to Tiger Brennan too. And you can plant the easement. There's no problem there.
It's actually this car park.
Oh yeah, there's a car park there, isn't there? Maybe we have to lose our car park at the end. You can still keep these two. You lose one car park there. We've ample car parking. So I think you need to show a 3 meter strip of landscaping down here. Decreases their yard space quite a bit. We'll go back to our in our maps. I know I didn't do it in the original application. We just did the 3 meters on this road and not to Tiger Brennan. It just made me think there now. that perhaps it should have been. I wonder what that M is. We still need to look that up, don't we? Maybe we need to seek a waiver. Okay, let's come back to this again. I'll come back to that issue with Tiger Brennan in a minute. The quality and extent of landscaping is to maintain for the life of the development, because, and that line is in there because what was found to be happening was people would plant plants in that spot just until they got their building signed off, and then they'd whip them all out and put concrete over it. So they had to put this extra line in. So this is the table to the clause. These are the minimum setbacks. So in the municipality of Alice Springs, our buildings with a frontage to the Stewart Highway, Smith Street or Larapinta Drive, we need a 9-metre setback. So that doesn't apply to us. We don't have a frontage to any of these. So buildings with frontage to Stewart Highway, Bagot Road or Dickworth Drive also need the 9 metres. Oh, sorry, that's just in Alice Springs. And then this one's the Darwin one for the Stewart Highway, Bagot Road or Dickworth Drive. And we need the 9 metres. Buildings frontage to all other streets, 3-metre setback. Minimum setback to at least one side boundary and to the rear boundary is 5 metres. What does that mean to you? What could you do with this site? Could you have a 0 lot line? Just read the last bit. Minimum setback to at least one side boundary and to the rear boundary. So you only have to have a setback to one of your side boundaries. Your other side boundary you could actually build on the 0 lot line. Okay. Everyone clear on that?
I don't want to have to have good height.
3 metres is building, buildings that have frontage to all streets, other than these streets here. So that's us. So our front setback to the street side, to Coonawarra Road, is 3 metres. Okay?
So if we don't want to have a parking just from one side and 0 from other side, what should we do?
Okay. Well, let's have a look at the site plan. So how was this building actually designed? So it was designed, it could have been designed that this boundary here was right on the boundary line. That's the boundary line there. We could have pulled the building back there. I think the reason they didn't on this project was to do with fire regulations, because they would have had to fireproof this wall if it was on the boundary. It would have had to been a blockwork wall, and they were going with their steel construction. So they allowed for a 3-metre setback here, but we had to be careful that we still achieved at minimum of 5 metres on this side. But we had ample room. We wanted to put a road and parking down this side. So we've got, 550, 5.5 metres, 7 metres for the road, and we're still 5 metres away from the face of the building there. Okay. Then what happens at the back? Got a couple of approximations here, but I'm pretty sure that's from the boundary line there. It actually says some setbacks here. New external wall to be 1,200 or 12,000 millimetres minimum from the eastern boundary to the grid line. Now that's to the grid line. And what I want to talk to you about a lot in this is, oh, my lines are too thick to really show there. So that's to a concrete panel. I just want to do you see this wall? This is the precast panel here at the base of the wall, and then this is the cladding. Okay, it's your line of cladding. That's your wall girts that they're attached onto. The dashed line is just some isolation that's sitting in there. and that 612 there is your portal frame distance. The dashed line down through the middle is the grid line, okay? When we do steel construction buildings like this, we work to the dimensions of the grid line a lot, right? Because when I think about a setback from that wall, where am I measuring from? How far out here? So this is my boundary out here, and I know that I need to be set 3 meters from that boundary. What am I measuring 3 meters from the boundary to what part of the wall?
To the outside wall.
Yeah, to this face of this cladding, okay? Quite often when you're preparing a planning application, because it's early in the design development of the project, you won't know this detail. You won't know what size these girts have to be, for instance, right? Maybe they're 100, maybe they're 150. So you don't quite know, okay? And that's why we use grid lines, because the grid line never moves. The grid line stays exactly where it is. The portal frame will stay exactly where it is, but all the other attachments onto that to hang things off, so especially the size of these wall girts. So you can see the concrete precast panel is going to be hard up against and run just past the portal frame, and that dictates everything at that level. But above that, where we've got cladding, it's the size of these girts, and that's going to come from the structural engineer that will determine what the distance is between there and that grid line. What does that mean when you're in your concept design and you want to think about things like setbacks, is that you need to allow fairly ample space. You need to be allowing a couple of 100 mil for yourself to allow for that, okay? So what was the dimension there? Let's actually give it to me to the grid line. 270, I'd have to just measure it off the drawing. And we'll say that's 300, so about 570 millimeters off the grid line to the outside face of our wall. Okay, that's quite a lot, isn't it? So when we look back at the section, back at the site plan, what we've done at that early stage is we've given a dimension from the boundary to the grid line, which is back here. And this is then the precast, and then because on our plans as well, all we're seeing is the concrete panel. We're not actually seeing the line of the cladding over that as well. So, but in theory, it should be taken to the line of the cladding. So, what we've said is the set out is to be that many meters from the grid line, and then this is an estimated or an approximate measurement of to the face of the metal cladding. Do you understand that concept? It's not always easy to know where that wall line is actually going to be, especially in steel buildings, from the get-go. So always good to, I'm a great believer in grid lines anyway for all buildings, even for housing. We don't see them too much here in housing because we're just doing single skin block work. But I think in your lifetimes, in your career, that will change. We won't always be using single skin block work. And once you start having cavity walls and double skin walls and steel walls, that dimension changes all the time. So for you to be able to know where you are in your drawing, measuring from a grid line is really, really helpful, because then when the size of your batten changes or the size of your wall girths change, it doesn't matter to your drawing. You're always measuring from the grid line anyway. Okay, so that's why that's written like that. Now, it doesn't make a massive amount of difference to the planners on this, but it might make it makes more difference up here. So what have we written here? New external wall to be, so new external wall to be 3 meters minimum from the face of cladding. See set out dimensions above. And then we've just shown our 3 meters. So we've shown our 3 meters to the face of the cladding, rather than the face of the precast concrete panel. And yeah, that's to the grid line. So we've allowed 600 millimeters from the face of the cladding to the grid line. Well, we worked it out, it was probably going to be around 570 or something like that. But you want to give yourself a couple of mil, because not only when the planner comes out, but even more to the point, Like for instance, the planner wasn't interested in this 3 metre setback. It allows a 0 setback there. But when it comes to the fire regulations, the last thing you want to do is on your final inspection, when it's actually built, that they come out and they measure it and it's 290 millimetres. Or sorry, 2 metres, 900 millimetres, you know. You need to have allowed that extra bit, so you're actually making sure that you meet all the minimum requirements to the boundary. Okay? So
you always put 350 instead of 300?
so it's 3 metres
3 meters?
is the clearance. That was just on this project, because on this project the portal frame was really, really hefty, but you have to work out what your structure is going to be and have an idea of this, or else just make sure you've allowed an extra couple of 100 mil from where your external line of your building is at planning stage, at concept stage. But even at concept stage, you've usually got your main structure worked out, so your portal frame. So it completely depends. I just want to show you that again. It completely depends on how thick this is, because this is the portal frame, and in this instance the portal frame is 600 millimeters. So you know, half of that from the grid line. The grid line's always through the center of your main structure, is already 300, and then another 270 for the girts and the cladding. Depends on how big the spans are between your portal frame, you know, and that's really all up to the structural engineer. But if you are doing a building like this, you probably engage your structural engineer very, very early. So you'll be asking him, how big is my portal frame going to be? How big are my wall or girts going to be? So you can get that external line of the building worked out nice and early. Alrighty. So that's really it for clause 9.1. There's not a whole lot more in it. And as you can see, for industrial areas, the main points are in the setbacks. So what are our setbacks going to be? What was it, 5 meters? Am I right in that? 5 meters from road boundary?
Minimum setback, one side and then rear. So at least one side and to the rear boundary.
That was
5 meters.
5 meters. Oh, that's where I'm getting far. So 3 meters to the road boundary.
Yeah, and then 1 from the rear. Now with this kind of a project where the entity is very obviously comes into play in terms
Yeah.
of parking spots and fire safety and all of that. So I assume that has to be checked before it goes to planning anyway.
Yes. So it's a bit different the way, because we're teaching you guys. We can't just teach you everything in the one day, because it's going to be way too much information. So we have to kind of go through the stages, and we try and follow concept design through to planning, through to building certification. But once you've done the process, and this is why it's really good for you guys to go and work with somebody else, because once they've brought you through the process a couple of times, what will happen is that you become aware of the pitfalls that are going to happen later in the project, unless you at least give them some attention in the concept design. Okay? So things like setbacks, fire ratings of walls, because you want to be able to pick out the right wall type to use in the concept design. So things like that, as soon as you start to become familiar with those rules and regulations, you'll start applying them to your concept design. It's just a bit of the cart before the horse. So we need to teach you step by step, and then you're going to be aware of them all, and then you bring all of that knowledge back with you to your next concept design when you go to do it. But you know, you're right in saying that all these things do come into play. And that's why, you remember when we did 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, we did all those checklists. So that in the very beginning of the project, you're actually making yourself aware of what is going to apply to this project. Okay? And we'll be back to using that checklist, the NCC checklist for 401, 402, 403. We'll be using that a lot in the next unit. So that's our checklist to make sure that we're not missing a regulation. We're not ignoring one.
And then
So,
also, let's say before
yeah.
the application goes in, you'll probably want to have a certifier engaged as well who will make sure that anything that we have to take into consideration in terms of planning is compliant with NCC.
It's a really difficult way to think about it because most times the person lodging the planning application is somewhat educated in terms of NCC. Now, for instance, I'll say that all these planners that are qualified planners, they went to uni and they just studied planning. So they're probably quite unaware of NCC regulations. And so then might not be the best person to give you advice on that. Personally, it's the architect or the project manager, the building designer, that is the one person who pulls all of those things together. Like remembering that when you get advice from the structural engineer, he's not thinking about planning. When you get advice from a planner, he's not thinking about the structural layout of it. And likewise with the building certifier. Now, you certainly could, and I worked in a team where building certification was part of the office that I worked in. And so, yes, I would, before I'd lodge a planning application, I would do it all myself, though, and design it all up because of your experience and your awareness. And you might put it in front of him and say, can you do a quick check on that? Is there anything way off there? And certainly, I think with that actual project, he did say to me, are you sure you want to go to a zero lot line there? You're going to have to fireproof that whole wall. Maybe discuss that back with the client. And so we did. And so the client said, no, we can pull it forward. We've got room. Pull it the 3 meters away from the boundary. And then we don't have to fireproof that wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But in general, you're the person. Whoever's running the project is the person who has to take all that information together and present it back to the client.
Yeah, but I just think that, let's say, if you're working in this large, at some stage you're going to need a certifier.
Yes, you are, yeah.
So maybe if you already know the certifier is going to be, you'd be just like, hey, I'm just about to submit the application.
I need your quick look over it.
Check, and I think I'm right, however, can you check the main thing?
Yeah. Have I got firewalls in?
Fire rate.
Yeah.
And, so anything that will, you don't want to submit the, what do you call it there? What is it?
Variation. Yeah. Now, it often happens that something, because certification is so detailed, it covers every aspect of the building, that there are often design changes due to certification issues further down the track. And that would warrant a variation to the application. But yeah, you'd be trying to avoid that as best you can. But variations for design changes, for regulation changes like that, are usually pretty okay to get through. Except if you have to move the whole building, which nobody wants to do. So, one boundary. And that's all the clauses. Loading bays. So can you make sure that you have your checklists up to date with these clauses for AT3? Again, your checklist 1, the documentation that you need to provide for for planning applications is going to be exactly the same. So you need your application form, you need your owner's letter of consent. Heads up, this is a company that owns this site. It's on all the names and details are on your student assessment guide. So you need to think of that when you're doing your letter of consent. Remember back when we did the delivery, we talked about if the land is owned by more than one person, either husband and wife or a company, that it must be signed, the letter of consent must be signed by all of the named owners of the land, okay? So check your student assessment guide for that information for this. Then you'll need your statement of effect addressing these clauses, and you'll need your drawings. So we'll need site plan, floor plan, sections, elevations indicating. You don't have to have a cover page, no. No, cover page is just a nice thing to have. It's not a requirement to submit that, okay? So I'm quite happy if you keep this one very straightforward, and, you know, we've only got 2 more days, and I think you've still got work to do on AT2. I'm hoping that AT3 is not going to be too onerous on you in this once you have your concept design drawings in Revit. That really it's going to be a matter of putting on some dimensioning, showing your areas, things like that. Not a huge amount of work on the drawings there. And doing once you've got that first statement of effect for AT1, I hope you're starting to find that once you copied over the statement of effect for AT2, even though the clause numbers might change and slightly different piece of writing that you have to do, this is fairly straightforward. It's 4 clauses, and they're pretty technical clauses. They're not necessarily, you have to write about the neighbours and privacy and all of those things that you would have for dwellings. It's very much a technical assessment here. Of course, you have to show your car parking calculations in your statement of effect. Okay?
Do I have to print off PDF in A3 or just
Yes, if you can print them off at A3, that'd be great. So when you're printing with your A1, sorry? Yes. So print from Revit to PDF, and then when you're printing the PDF, print at 50% on A3, okay? No scaling to fit. Okay?
In terms of floor plans, we've got in our set of drawings, we've
Yeah.
got ground floor, and then we've got a typical unit, ground floor and mezzanine floor.
I would like your drawing set to look like the architectural one. So if we have a look at what we have. We've got a site plan, we've got 2, which contradicted each other.
I'm assuming that obviously we can chuck out a little landscaping on the one side plan.
You can put your landscaping on the site plan. You do not need a separate landscaping plan for this, for an industrial project, okay? It's not necessary. You don't need to do a whole planting layout or anything like that.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
while I have open there,
Mhm.
do you mind popping in there just to see, because I have those drawings in there, do we use all those drawings I'm going to ask? Because we did, that's a typical,
Okay, well, let's have a look at your sheet set. That's probably a better idea.
just because I want to know exactly what I can take out or what.
Yeah. So we need the site plan, obviously.
Yeah.
We need,
Ground floor.
what scale is this at, though? Oh, Jesus. No, 1:150. That's a terrible scale. Because we usually go 1:200 or 1:100, not 1:150. I know.
Equally on there, so it's either going to be really small or it's
So
going to fit.
what we did here
That's on that one.
at 1:100 is you just do half the building on one sheet and half on the next. And then you get, because all your floor plans should be 1:100. So if we look at the guide for documents, do I have it handy here? That the planners require, I'm pretty sure they require ground floor plans at 1:100.
I think it's interesting. I think it's at least.
Let's get rid of my grids, I can put it on there.
Yeah, no less than 1 to 200.
Oh, 1:200, okay. It's up to you guys, but when we go to do a full set of working drawings, I'm going to want you to have ground floor plans at 1:100.
Okay.
So you can set it up now, or you can give me the plans at 1:200 now for planning if you want, but I'm going to ask you to set them up like this at 1:100 for working drawings, because there's no way we can have a set of working drawings with plans at anything less than 1:100.
It does, you need to.
Do I need grids? Yes, I'd quite like to see the grids. But if you do this, so you can do this easily in Revit.
Yeah.
You just,
Our sheet is A1.
yeah.
It's 100, it's really smaller. It's really big sheet.
The sheet is at one side.
No, mine 1 to 100 fits for A1.
Yeah?
Mine fits, but just the grid doesn't fit in there.
Mine is, and even with grids, it's fine.
Oh my gosh, that's how it works.
It's very tight, but it works. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm going to change my grid to that.
Yeah, pull your grids in. You can pull them in as tight as you want, and you only need to have grid markers on one side.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm going to do. Just readjust the grid.
And these areas, we mark the areas and like these.
wet room.
Yes, yeah, I would, yeah.
And also, with a mezzanine, I think I actually ended up, so I ended up,
Yeah, just do a typical mezzanine, that's fine.
Yeah, right, and
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so I can
Yeah.
say the area.
Yes, so let me see how we did this one. So then we just split the ground, so this is just a ground floor split in two, to get it on as 1:100, because obviously you can get some legends on and things like that then. And then, so then I've got the first floor plan, so get a first floor plan on at 1:100 for the whole thing as well, okay, because you need to always demonstrate the layout of the whole building, because somebody who doesn't know this building doesn't know that that mezzanine is there for every single unit unless you show them a first floor plan showing a mezzanine at every one, okay? And that's at 1:100 as well, if you can get it on at that. And then, so then we've done, we'll look at this in working drawings. We'll look at like pulling out areas then. That's a typical ground floor enclosure area at 1:20. And why is that 1:20? Because you've got lots of detailed measurements to get in here for disabled accessibility and things like that. Okay? And that's a mezzanine. Oh, go back. 1:50. So it's just showing the layout of your WCs in that there as well. Roof plans we'll come back to later on. Your elevations, they're all at 1:100 on one A1 sheet as well. So if we do site plan, 1:200, floor plan 1:100, first floor plan 1:100, elevations 1:100, and then one section is sufficient for this. But I would like to see this section being this section here. You don't have to do the one through the mezzanine. You can just do one through the warehouse, because all you're really wanting to show is the height of this, off the ground level. Okay? Happy with the sheet sets? We will be doing a bit more work on these sheet sets as we get into working drawings. Loading bays. I just want to write on that. Not in green. But I'm hoping that this is a much simpler application than than the 82, for instance.
It looks like in 82 is the most.
That's why I'm concentrating on doing 83 than 82 now.